So we're a few minutes in. Thanks, Danny, Mark, and Pete for keeping me company while we wait for everyone to roll in here. Yeah, so just today we're going to be talking about Marketing 103. This is the third in the series of several marketing seminars that I've been doing. These are all recorded. They're going to be up on our Excel training platform for everyone to go back and watch the other ones. So if you missed 101 and 102, don't worry. You'll be able to catch up on those on the Excel platform once they're up there. So today's topic for Marketing 103 is going to be sphere of influence marketing. This is probably one of the more important ones. So just to go over what the seminar series has been so far, Marketing 101 was on farming, 102 was on online marketing. We did those last month. Today, sphere of influence, and then we do have a Marketing 104 in this marketing seminar series, which is going to be on marketing listings. And that's going to be on September 30th at 10 a.m. So circle that date on your calendar. Okay, so talking sphere of influence marketing. Sphere of influence is one of the first places you should always look to when you're doing any sort of your marketing strategy or just your business planning. Sphere of influence is the lowest hanging fruit out there. There's people you know, or at least somewhat know, so you have less of a barrier to getting their business, right? So these are the people that you got phone numbers, maybe addresses for, whatever. They're the people who would recognize you on the street. They know you to see you. It's so much easier to get business from these people as opposed to going out and meeting people you've never met before. There's that extra barrier that you got to get over, and that's that prospecting, the higher hanging fruit. So the fruit is the same no matter where you get it from, but why go through that extra effort to get the prospecting fruit if you haven't picked all of the sphere of influence fruit? So that's kind of the thought process. I'm not saying don't prospect. Prospecting is great, but if you aren't getting all the easy stuff first, you should be focusing on that before going up on that ladder and grabbing the fruit from the high side of the tree. It's also the best return on your investment because you already know these people. You've got them, you got their information, you got them in your CRM. The return on investment is so much more valuable. You have to put less money into each of these contacts in order to get a return out of them. So again, these are the best people to market to. And I always say to anybody, if you've got any sort of size of sphere of influence, they're the ones you should be marketing to first. And once that sphere of influence is saturated, that's where you move on to the higher hanging fruit. Okay, so when you're marketing to your sphere of influence, there should be really three goals. I have no idea who the soccer player is. He's probably some famous guy, but like when I Googled on Google Images, 3 goals, this guy just kept popping up. It must be some sort of internet meme, who knows? But there's 3 goals that you want to look at. And whenever I look at anything when it comes to marketing, I always try and break everything down to like the fundamentals of what you're trying to achieve. And anything real estate related, you should always just do this. If you're trying to find if you're trying to achieve a goal, just break it down to the fundamentals and figure out what at the very base level it is you're trying to do. So when doing that, I came up with 3 solid targets or 3 goals you should be working towards when you're marketing towards your sphere of influence. And when you're doing any sort of marketing strategy, you should say, okay, am I ticking off any of these 3 boxes? That's the important thing that should be driving whatever the marketing efforts that you're doing. I came up with fancy names for these. I could probably simplify them a bit, but I wanted to make sure they were very specific. Number 1, I'm going to be talking about these all in detail. Reinforced association. Number 2, opportunistic timing. And 3, brand recognition. Okay, so I'll go into each of these 3 in more detail to go over what each of them are. Starting with reinforced association. So the way I like to consider this is if you played word association or someone else played word association with you, right? Like Peter was here on the call earlier. If someone said the name Peter Holgate and you had to do word association with Peter, you want to make sure that on the list, the top 3 things that person says, when they associate words with Peter, that realtor or real estate agent is in the top 3, right? I did a little word cloud here. You've probably seen them before. I just put a bunch of things that I do, right? Like I like to climb, play hockey, that kind of thing. I wanted to make sure that when someone thinks about this word cloud about me, that real estate is front and center. It's really important because we want to make sure when someone is thinking about real estate or thinking about transacting in real estate, you come up, right? And I put a picture of Steve in a snowblower here. People are probably wondering what's Steve Warren, our manager from the Newmarket office, doing on the slide next to a snowblower. it was more to remind me of an anecdote that he told in a presentation that really stuck with me once. He gave a story where his neighbor, she was like an elderly neighbor, and he always would go during the winter and plow or drive. Right, this is when he was a realtor, and he'd be like, hey, Miss Smith, like, like, how's it going? He's like, oh, thanks, thanks, Steve, for plowing my drive every day. He'd do it all the time religiously, right? And then she put her home up for sale with another realtor, and he was like, oh my gosh, like, how is this possible? I go and like literally plow her drive every time there's a snowstorm. I'm like the nicest neighbor. And it clicked to him. He's like, you know what? She probably doesn't even know that I'm a realtor. She just associates me with being like that nice neighborly guy who like plows the drive, cuts her grass, does all the things. But because she doesn't associate me with real estate, she didn't, just mention to me that she was thinking of listing her property, that, and I see her like multiple times every week, right? So that's where it clicked for Steve, and he realized he was failing, is because that word association, that reinforced association, again, our goal number one here, he missed the mark with that neighbor. And I was guilty of this as well. Like when I first started getting into real estate, I play hockey with a bunch of guys. I run a hockey league, and I'm sure a lot of them just saw me as like, that guy that they play hockey with, the guy that runs their league. They didn't really associate me necessarily with real estate, and I had to get that changed so that when people were playing the word association game in their brain with me, that they started to think more about real estate. And it's important to get in that mindset. I know Aaron Richardson loves to say, like, don't be a secret agent, and that's kind of what this has to do with. Just get outside of your comfort zone. Make sure you're chatting to people about real estate. Make sure they understand you're a realtor throughout all of the stuff that you do. So a lot of sphere of influence marketing, that's one of the goals, is to make sure you get this reinforced association starting with everybody in your sphere of influence. The second goal of marketing your sphere of influence is opportunistic timing. Uh, you want to make sure when people are ready to purchase or even just start thinking about real estate, that you're sitting there up against their window. Maybe not like this person here, because that's kind of like a little bit of a creepy image there, just like, like staring into their house. But you want to make sure that you catch them within that 3-month window, which is approximately what the window is, where they start thinking about real estate before they actually pull the trigger and go out and find a realtor. Right? That's what a lot of sphere influence marketing is based around, is make sure you have touch points so that they get that piece of marketing in the mail, or you pick up the phone and you chat to them. They're like, oh yeah, like I was just starting to look at houses. We're thinking of listing in the spring. That kind of conversation. You want to make sure that you're there and you're ready when they're ready to have the conversation. You want to make sure that you're easily accessible and available to them. Um, or at least they're seeing your stuff during that period. They'll be like, oh yeah, like I forgot I keep seeing Danny's stuff every month. Maybe I'll give him a call along with the other agents that I'm going to call to come in for a listing appointment, right? You want to make sure you have that constant flow of stuff coming in front of them, those constant touch points, to make sure that when they're ready, you're front and center and ready to have a conversation with them. And the big thing to remember is that people are lazy, right? If they're presented opportunities and things are in front of them, they will jump on those. Whereas they don't always seek you out. You may be like, well, like they're my cousin, like they should give me a call. Well, maybe when they were starting to think about real estate, their neighbor happened to be there, like next to them, and they were chatting. They were chatting about real estate. Oh yeah, like I'm thinking about listing my house in the spring. They started chatting to their neighbor about it, who happens to be a realtor too. And yeah, like if that neighbor wasn't there, maybe they would have called you. But the fact that you weren't that kind of lowest barrier to entry, that person right in front of them at the time, they ended up going with somebody else. So that's where the opportunistic timing comes in. You want to make sure that you're there once that conversation is starting to be had with them. And if you're not, they're just going to, if there's another realtor that's in front of them during that window, there's a good chance they may just go with them and you'll lose that client. So you want to make sure you have that opportunity to get in front of them during that, again, crucial 3-month window. And the problem is you don't necessarily even know when that window is, right? So you have to constantly be getting touch points with your clients. The third goal, and this is a bit more of a longer term play, is brand recognition. So goal number one, which again, if you go back here, you'll remember, was reinforced association. That is about trying to get people to associate you with real estate. So think about you, they think about real estate. This goal is almost the opposite. When they think about real estate, you want them thinking about you, right? So once you have that set and in place, you're really cooking with gas, because anytime they think about real estate, they'll be like, okay, yeah, like Mark Strachan, right? Like he's the number one guy in the area. I see his stuff all the time. That's the third goal, is to make sure that you start to be brand recognized with whatever your sphere is, to make sure whenever they think about real estate, they start thinking about you. Okay, so those are the three primary goals. So the next question becomes like, okay, that's great, Linus. How do I do this? The implementation is always the hardest part, and it doesn't have to be. Okay, I'm going to go through 4 quick steps. You may want to take notes, or maybe like, bookmark the video for when you come back and watch it again. So I'm going to hand this to you in the silver platter. I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do to market to your CRM. I always like to say that real estate isn't a cookie cutter business, right? But there are certain things that you can do which are a little bit cookie cutter to make sure that you have success. And there are a lot of things in marketing to your CRM that you can just pretty much pick up out of this playbook, and you can implement into your own marketing strategy. So I'm going to start with the first one, which seems pretty simple, but it shocks me how difficult it can be for agents to do this sometimes. First thing you need to do is put all your contacts into our CRM. It doesn't matter what CRM it is. Okay, like we do provide you Remarketer, which is a great sphere of influence CRM, and it makes your life a lot easier, and it's free because it's included with your with being part of Central Toronto Heritage Group. But it doesn't matter as long as you have something. It could be a spreadsheet, it could be your phone. Remarketer is better. It could be KV Core, anything you're paying for. If you like a different kind of CRM system that we don't offer, that's great. As long as it's something you're going to use, the CRM, the best CRM is a CRM that you use, right? The one that you're most comfortable with. But I'm going to give you a little bit of tough love here. Like, you just got to do it. Okay. Put in the information. It doesn't take long. It seems to be this like stumbling block for so many agents. And like I said, I see it all the time. When I went and first did this, the first time I went through and put all of my contacts into CRM, it took me maybe a few hours, right? Just go through your phone, take or your address book, wherever you have your contacts, kind of like left, right, and center. Get their name, email, address. That's all you need to put in there, right? You can flesh through the details and start like filling it out a bit more later on. But all you need to get started is a name, email, and their address. Oh, and phone number. So I don't know why I didn't put phone number here. Name, email, address, and phone number, right? If you don't have their address, whatever, you'll get it eventually. You'll be able to fill it in along the way, but you want to at least get started. So get the contacts into your CRM, right? Now, once you've done the CRM, you got all the contacts in there, you need to form a plan. This is kind of like the bulk of the presentation I'm going to be giving today, is just how to actually execute the plan. And I find this is where a lot of agents stumble too. Obviously, it's a bit of a barrier to get everyone into your CRM, but once they're there, a lot of agents just don't know what to do, right? And that's what I'm going to go over right now. And again, I'm going to give this to you on a silver platter. It's a pretty simple formula for what you need to do. It's a low lift. It's not too it's not too costly as well, and it's going to give you the best returns at the end of the day. So there's 8 things that every agent really should do. Okay, yeah, maybe you don't want to do all 8. That's fine. You can pick and choose based on like this conversation and whatever works with your kind of way of doing business. Number 1, newsletters. That's physical newsletters. Popeyes calendars, so it's like annual calendars that you deliver to them with your branding on it. E-newsletters, note cards, birthday cards, phone calls, probably the most important thing on the list, and an event of some sort. Okay, so going over each of these individually, starting with newsletters. Newsletters are probably the most cost-effective mailed marketing you can do. This is a newsletter with market stats. They're mailed to your sphere of influence contacts once a month. It's $1.55 per month. And one of the nice things is it can be a very time-efficient marketing method. Especially if you use, I'm going to give a little promotion here to the Spotlight newsletter program. There's a link there for it, homemedia.com/newsletter program. You can come to these links too in Remarketer in our brokerage hub section as well. But one of the nice things about a set it and forget it type newsletter system like this is you set your branding once and then it just happens automatically. You pay the $155 per contact per month, and it just goes out to your sphere of influence every month until you tell Spotlight or Homania to stop the program, right? It's extraordinarily time efficient. It may take you like 30 minutes to set up the initial branding. There's a graphic designer that'll help you out on that. And then you just let it go, right? That's all you have to do. It's nice, time efficient, easy, and it's not very expensive either. So I'm going to be putting together a bit of a budget as I go through each of these points, because at the very end, I'm going to show you how much it's going to cost per client on your sphere of influence with this plan. The budget for this one is $18.60 a year. That's just taking the $155 per month, multiplying it by 12. I can't stress how important a physical mailed newsletter is. A lot of people will say, yeah, Linus, you know what? Like, people throw out, they don't even read it. that's fine. It comes in a mailed envelope that's addressed to them. So they're going to open the envelope because they're going to want to see what's inside. They'll see your junk mail in there, if you want to call it junk mail. A lot of people find it valuable too with the market stats. They'll see your name and everything on there. It's folded so they see it straight up front. They'll be like, oh, it's Mark's junk mail again. They'll throw it in the recycling, but at least they saw Mark's stuff, right? You got in front of them. You remind them monthly that they're getting that they're seeing you, right? And repetition is so important in marketing. And I know I know there's agents on this call even that say, like, you know what, Linus, like I like to do like a more personalized touch every month. I like to write my own newsletters, do this, do this, do that. And that's fine. Eventually you're going to get to the point though where you become so busy you're not going to have time to do that anymore. So you want to make sure you're time efficient. This is a great way to be time efficient. It's not as much about the content, it's about getting in front of the people. Okay. So newsletters, if there's one thing you're going to take away from this, is that you should probably start a newsletter program. And I've got the Spotlight newsletter program here, and that's what the graphic is up on the screen. But you can use whatever you want. Like this is just something that we provide through the office, which is a nice, simple, cost-effective, easy, low lift newsletter to send out. But there are tons of third parties out there, so use whatever works for you. Popeyes, the next one. 2 Popeyes a year. Okay, Popeyes are so invaluable, and I find a lot of agents, one of the reasons they don't do Popeyes is, well, there's usually two reasons. They say, oh, I'm just too busy for it, or they just don't know what to do, right? So you shouldn't ever be too busy for a Popeye. Popeyes are one of the most valuable touch points um, for a couple of reasons. Usually when you're giving, and again, this depends on what the thing is that you're giving during your Popeye, it tends to be sticky, but also it's a gift, right? So there's the law of reciprocation. If someone receives a gift from you, whatever it is, as corny as it is, or as cheap or as expensive as it is, they feel like they need to reciprocate somehow by sending you business or like using you in the future, whatever it is, letting their mother-in-law know that they've got a really great realtor in town. You should give them a call, like that kind of thing, right? So you pop by, you drop off, you give them a call in advance. Say, hey, I'm just dropping off some gifts in the area. You're gonna be home in the next half hour. I'd love to stop by and give it to you. Stop by, have a quick 5-minute chat, give it to them. Thanks for your business, whatever. See what kind of opportunities might shake out from that conversation. You're giving someone something. It doesn't have to be a ton of value. Like I just say, like $5 or less. They're gonna want to try and give you something in return, and it's one of the most valuable things you can do. Best use of your time. People ask all the time, like, what should I be doing or like thinking about when I do Popeye? The the one thing I always say is anything that's sticky is great. And what I mean by sticky is things that are going to stay in the home in a visible spot for as long as possible. I know a ton of people who love doing like baked goods, food, that kind of thing. That's great, and like don't stop doing that if that's what you enjoy. But you got to remember those things, they get consumed and then they're gone, right? Like it's great, you got the gift, you get a lot of reciprocation happening, all that, but you don't get the reminder sticking around their household. So if you can think of something that would stick around for a longer period of time, then those are better items, right? I know we've used the example of like an ice cream scoop, like yep, for the scoop on real estate, like, contact me and you got like an ice cream scoop, it's got your branding on it, whatever. So every time they're scooping up ice cream, they'll see your name and everything on it. That's an example of something that's sticky. I'll give another example too, and I think I saw Dennis on the call earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here. And use him as an example because I love what him and Maureen do. Maureen, Dennis's wife, she makes like the best relish in the world. She calls it her $1 million relish, and they've started doing Popeyes or planning on starting to do Popeyes, where they drop off a jar of her $1 million relish with a label on it saying like, we relish the opportunity to work with you. It's got Dennis and Maureen on it, their contact information. Amazing. It's that edible which everyone loves, but it also, because it's relish, you're not eating, I mean, hopefully you're not eating relish all in one sitting. It's going to sit in that fridge for months, right? During the, like as you're going through your 50 hot dogs, whatever it takes to get through that over the course of many months, people are going to be seeing Dennis and Maureen every time they open their fridge. Perfect example of a great Popeye idea. Low cost, basically it's going to cost them a mason jar, right? And the cost of making the relish itself. So Popeyes, again, looking at budgeting, if you're doing 2 a year, you're probably talking $5 each, so $10 a year for a contact. Next thing you want to consider too, and I had this conversation last week with someone about calendars, right? Calendars are great. They're another sticky item, right? And it's an opportunity to do a Popeye too. You can Popeye with a calendar or just drop it off at their door. It's pretty cost effective. They're only $2.40 a year if you go through our marketing department. Again, you don't have to. You can go through whatever system you want to get these calendars out there, but we do, through our marketing department, we do have the calendar program that, if you're thinking about it for December, you should get on it soon, so you don't have to, because the cost does go up as you get closer and closer to December. Um, but one of the great things about calendars is it's not a calendar just about you, right? It's a calendar about cars or sports or whatever. You can choose whatever genre you want to go with, but it'll have your branding on each of the months. So if someone puts it up on the wall, they'll flip through the pages, they'll see all of your branding every time they're using it, like as like their day planner or whatever in their kitchen wall. And I know not everyone uses calendars, but like I do at home, right? Like my wife, we have one of our calendars that goes up every January, and we put all the family stuff on there. I still use Google Calendar and all that kind of stuff, but the paper and pen, there's so many people are still stuck to that, and there's so much value in having that hung up in the kitchen or wherever you hang up your calendars, that giving someone a calendar before they go and buy their own calendars come, December, January, whenever it is, they'll likely just use yours, especially if it's a good calendar that is something that's kind of specific to, like, their interests. And we do have that opportunity to, pick different kinds of calendars for your clientele through the marketing department here. And you know what? Even if they don't use it, it's a low cost gift that you're giving someone. Again, law of reciprocation comes in here too. And at least, at least they see you, they know that you gave them this, and they'll thank you for it. And it's a good touch point. But for $240 a year, if you have something that's going to hang up in someone's kitchen and they're going to see it every day, you can't, well, I mean, you can put a price tag on it, but it's pretty invaluable. So definitely good use of your budget spend. E-newsletters. So emails are very cost effective and can be time effective as well. Going back to the whole newsletter discussion as well, we do write newsletters for the GTA, for Kingston, for all the different markets that we're in, and we put them into your remarketer inbox. So you can send out, like I write a Kingston market update. I need to write one actually today or tomorrow for Kingston market for last month. But you can just go in, take what we've written, you can send it out to your sphere of influence. It'll be branded by you with like a header and a footer. And it's as simple as, like, taking like the 3 minutes or whatever it is to do that. So it's extremely time effective. It doesn't cost you a dime. It is a virtual touch point, so there is less value than a physical touch point, but it still is a touch point, right? It'll have interesting, relevant information about the market in the area, market stats, that kind of thing. One of the great things about the remarketer system is you can actually take that newsletter and you can customize it. I know one of our agents up here in Kingston, Erin Gallagher, she hates the header that I use. She takes it, she puts her own in there. I'm like, that's fine, Erin, like make it your own. She puts in some events in the area as well, right, that she's targeting for sphere of influence. She puts in a few listings. You can do that. You can take what we have, use it as the framework for your newsletter, and add to it. The whole point of what we're doing by writing these for you is to take a bit of that lift off your shoulders, so you don't have to spend a morning writing a newsletter or trying to fumble through ChatGPT or your AI program of choice and making sure that it comes through with a pretty well-written newsletter that's relevant. Right? So remarketing makes it super easy. And if you have ever had any problems sending stuff out through remarketer, just get in touch with me, get in touch with one of your managers or one of your peers, and we can show you how to use it and to effectively send out these e-newsletters. And like I said, it doesn't cost you a dime. Next thing, note cards and birthday cards. I'm lumping those in together here. So one thing you should try and do, and Facebook, social media usually makes it a little bit easier to find these out if you don't have them, is find out people's birthdays, put those birthdays into your CRM. Okay. In Remarketer, you can actually check on the calendar. Like, there's a calendar view every month to see whose birthdays are coming up. And what I would suggest do is, set aside a period of time every month, or you can just do it once a year. You can just do all your birthday cards, get a stack done, and just have them ready, right? And then you can even put the postage on them and everything. Just have them sitting, in your office, and you just mail them out once a month for anyone who's in the January stack or the February stack or whatever. I want to make sure that when you're doing things like this, you're being very time efficient, right? So don't just look to see, okay, who's got a birthday this week? I'll crack out the cards. I'll write a note. I'll put in an envelope, put the postage on it and send it out. You're doing that every time you've got a birthday come up on your calendar. That's gonna be extremely time inefficient. You do it in like one session, and you sit down and you just do like 100 of them in like an afternoon or whatever. You write them out if you're doing handwritten note cards. It'll be a lot more time efficient in the long run. Yeah, it kind of sucks you have to spend an afternoon writing notes, but it's much better than spending 15, 20 minutes to each individual one for like maybe 100 people throughout the year. So try and think about ways to be time efficient. You can do these in advance, right? So try and do that. And the same thing with note cards. Note cards, the things that I like to do note cards with is something like the image on the graphic here is just sending out like a Christmas card, like Happy New Year's. I know some realtors do Halloween cards, other holidays, like whatever it is. Just like a little note card, maybe it's a picture of you and your family if you're doing like Christmas cards or New Year's cards or whatever. A little handwritten note inside is amazing. It's very powerful to do a handwritten note. People really, really appreciate that extra step that you do. But yeah, so choose whatever it is, whatever holiday or time of the year that you want to send these out. You can do them all in advance. You can get them all done in an afternoon, right? And these are low budget items too. For sending out a birthday card and note card with the stationery and the postage, it ends up being about $5 a year for 2 note cards to each of your clients. Phone calls. This is probably one of the most important points, and this is something that a lot of agents, especially when they're busy, they don't do enough of. It costs you absolutely nothing. It's the most valuable touch point. Um, you you want to make sure you're calling everybody on your sphere of influence at least twice a year. That obviously varies based on what their temperature of the client is. If they're warm, if they're listing soon, right, or want to get active soon, maybe you're calling a bit more frequently than that. But you want to make sure you talk to everybody at least twice a year on your sphere of influence list. Make sure you have that touch point. Because if you're on the phone with them, like I said, people are lazy, right? If you're talking to them already and they are thinking about buying and selling, they're going to talk to you about it, right? Whereas if you didn't pick up that phone that one day and call them, they might just go with their neighbor, their brother, their sister-in-law, whoever. Like everyone seems to have like 10 realtors these days. You want to make sure you're the easiest, lowest barrier to entry person in front of them, right? It doesn't cost you a thing. It's only time. I'm going to talk a little bit more about phone calls in a bit because I'm going to talk about implementing the plan. This is just the plan for now. So just hold tight for that. The final thing that I think everybody should do is an event of some sort. It doesn't have to be complicated. I've seen every realtor event I've gone to has been well worth the effort and the money spent on it. This can be these are typically client appreciation events or maybe like a neighborhood event. But since we're talking about sphere of influence, I guess we'll like limit it to more of like the client appreciation event avenue. This can be something like a barbecue, like a Christmas party where you have like a Santa to come take pictures of, like the family, and so they can send out their Christmas cards. If you do something like that, do it in November too, so you can get ahead of that game for people. A Halloween event, I've seen people do that very successfully. Even an event at a pub, right? Like just inviting your group out to come and hang out at a pub one night, right? And maybe even like, like I know Danny said this before. I apologize if I'm using your idea here, Danny, but hey, come to the pub, first beer's on me type thing, right? Invite people out. A lot of these are low lift, low cost ideas, right? It doesn't have to cost a lot per person. You may be spending like $10 per person who comes to whatever these events are, if even that, right? And if you're putting on an event where people enjoy their time there, that is extraordinarily valuable. You're likely going to be working the event too, walking around, shaking hands, having conversations. You'll find that people are going to come to you and talk about their real estate interests for the year or whatever it happens to be. There is nothing that can supplant having a really well-run event. And a lot of agents don't do this, and I'm shocked they don't do it. It's also an excuse to reach out. Talk about making phone calls twice a year. You call them, invite people out to the event. Don't just send them an email blast. You send an email blast. I'll give a little bit of an anecdote here. We had our Kingston grand opening a few months ago, opening our brand new office up here just to show off the space, the agents in town. I sent out an email blast to most people on the real estate board. But then I also called about 100 agents. I wanted to call more, but that's about how much I had time for. Of the 100 agents I called, I'd say about 30 or 40 of them showed up. Of the 600 plus agents I emailed, there's probably only a couple of those that ended up coming, right? Because if someone calls you and personally invites you out to an event and you're sending reminders and be like, hey, like, you're coming to that event, there's a much, much higher chance they're going to come. Like, I mean, just using that as an example, like it was about 30% of the people I talked to ended up coming, whereas, maybe like 1% of the people I emailed ended up coming. So don't feel like you can just put on this amazing event and just send an email to your sphere and expect to get a good attendance. You need to be calling people, talking to people, even knocking on doors to invite people out to an event. If you do it like that, you're going to have a much more well-attended event. I can't stress that enough. in-person invites or over the phone invites are invaluable. Right? This is a great, like I said, a great touch point for your sphere of influence as well. A great reason to reach out and give them a call. And then it doesn't feel like, like, hey, it's Linus, I'm just calling to check in, like, you're thinking of buying or selling in the fall. It's like you've got a good reason to call, right? Be like, hey, I'm just having a great event. Just like to invite you out to this barbecue that I'm going to be running in the neighborhood in a couple of weeks. Love to see you out, right? Like free food, right? We got some drinks that we're providing, whatever it is. Like you're giving that complimentary thing to them. They're going to want to hear from you. So again, the budget for that, about $10 a year. So looking at the plan that I just kind of presented and spreading it out over the course of a year, like I said, you want to make sure you've got constant touch points. And if you execute this plan, you're going to have the constant touch points. These are the scheduled items, so newsletters, e-newsletters, pop-bys, the event that you're doing, the calendars, and the let's say like an end of year note card. Those are all the things I've got on here. You'll notice every month is full of things to do. And then also, if you put in the unscheduled events, like the ones that might be different depending on the client, you also put in birthday cards and a few calls a year, right? So we're just adding those in here. Uh, it's suddenly you've got touch points every few months, right? Like really high value ones as well as lower value ones too. So looking at this plan here, like if someone is thinking of buying or selling in any sort of window, like you're going to be in front of them at one point. So it's important to make sure that when you do schedule things like your events, planning on when you're going to be doing your note cards, when you're beginning out your calendars, that kind of thing, you do spread things out a bit. You don't want everything to happen in December because you're losing the value of having staggered touch points. So take a look at the calendar, be like, okay, maybe Christmas time's a little bit too full on my end for like the touch points. Maybe that pop by, I'll do it instead in March or whatever, right? Try and spread things around so you have consistent touch points throughout the year. And when you're doing pop buys, events, that kind of thing, you can strategically think like, okay, maybe I should do it a couple months before the market gets busy, right? Before the spring market. So you have that opportunity to talk to people before they're getting active. So that's another consideration when you're trying to plan your very high value events or touch points like Popeyes events. Try and time them around when, like, a few months before the market's presumably going to get hotter. So looking at the whole budget here, just putting through everything through the ringer, it ends up being $46 a year per contact. And that is an extremely good investment. This is a lot of touch points for $46 a year. Like that person, whoever you're sending and doing all these things with, they're going to be using you. And I did some rough numbers here based on, I think it was a $15,000 average commission. Someone tends to buy or sell once every 8 years. That works to be about roughly, like $1,800, maybe around $2,000 a year from a client, right? Someone who's going to be buying or selling it once every 8 years. That's the kind of return on your investment you're looking at here. I know this is a really rough estimate here, but I just want to kind of give you an idea of like what your investment is versus what your expected return can be from a client. And that expected return from a client can be like orders of magnitude bigger than that, especially if they're giving you referrals. Maybe they're an active investor, right? Maybe they got to buy and sell every 8 years instead of just buying, right? Because people usually have a place to sell as well. This number can be a lot higher, a lot more value. So putting a $50 budget or less than that on each of your contacts every year is invaluable. And I definitely say that make sure you put this as part of your business plan when you put your business plan together for the year going forward. Okay, so that's the plan I've just given you on a silver platter. The next, it's easy to come up with a plan. Then the next challenge is actually like putting people on the plan and executing it. So I want to talk about that a little bit before we end off today. So step 3, and we've got everyone in your contacts into the CRM. We've got a plan. Now you got to put people on that plan and figure out what your systems are going to be to make sure that you can do that and not have anyone fall off the boat. So the first thing I'm going to look at is most of these items are regularly scheduled items. They're scheduled events or things that happen, right? So they're really easy to organize in your system. And what you essentially do is you go into your CRM and you tag people that are on your individual programs. If you're going to put everybody on your your newsletter, your e-newsletter, your note card, your calendar, like whatever, if you have like everyone on the same program, you just have to do one tag, right? You just tag everybody who you want on this program as, like eCamp or campaign or drip or whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. Then you know that anytime you have to pull out note cards, you just go into your CRM, You filter by whatever that tag is. And again, if you don't know how to do that, just talk to your manager, talk to me. I'm happy to go over this side of things with Remarketer with you. And then you just go through the list, right? And you just go through them all. You send out, you write your note cards for each one of them, one at a time. And you send them out. For your e-newsletters, you just do the same thing, but you just blast out your e-newsletters to everyone who's tagged with the e-newsletter tag or drip tag or whatever it is. For all of those, it's really easy. If they're just tagged like that, and whenever that comes up in your Google Calendar that it's time to go order my calendars for the year, you can easily pull off that list from Remarketer and send the marketing out to that list. These scheduled items, it makes it much more efficient for putting together this content if you tag people accordingly. And oftentimes, like again, for the physical mailed newsletters, as an example too, it's very hands off. Spotlight will actually come in, they'll grab your CRM list of tagged contacts and they'll send it out for you every month. So that's even a lower lift than some of these other items. But I want to make sure you get in the habit of using your CRM, tagging people in your CRM. So when it comes time to send out any of these scheduled marketing items, you can really easily see who the list of people is that you need to send these to. So the unscheduled items, the calling plan is something that you need to think about how you can implement it. There's a ton of different ways to do this. I'm just going to give you one suggestion. Like anything, the way that works for you or the way that you feel the most comfortable with is the most effective. Okay, so don't necessarily take the way that I'm laying it out here. If you've got a better system that gets you to make those phone calls every day, use that plan. Okay, I want to stress that. The best marketing plan is the plan that you will follow through with. But if you're looking for a place to start, you're just putting people in your CRM, you're getting your CRM organized, tag absolutely everybody on your CRM with a tag that says need to call, right? Something like that, like need to call, reach out, something like that. And then when you start sitting down every morning and you're making your calls, take off, like call everybody. And when you call them and you get in touch with them, take that tag need to call off of that contact and add a different tag to them, which will be the temperature of the leads. So like warm, hot, cold, whatever it is. Make sure you take notes, right? Whenever you're talking to anybody on the list, you take notes, you fill out any information. Like if you find out their birthday or their address during the phone call, you put those kinds of things in. But take notes about the call. It doesn't have to be real estate related. I mean, obviously, if they talk to you about real estate, make a note, like planning a listing in the spring, a couple of years out, whatever it happens to be. But make sure you also put in notes there about like social cues, right? Like their daughter's getting married in the spring. They're planning on taking a Tai Chi class in the fall, like anything like that that comes up. Because when you've got hundreds of people you're making calls to, it helps to remind you about things you can talk about. You'd be like, oh yeah, like how'd the wedding go, right? Like that kind of thing, which you may forget if you didn't take the notes. When you take notes, again, I'm going to go reference Remarketer, but it doesn't matter what system you're using. It's important to put the date that you made the note and just like a sentence or two about it. And if you like in Remarketer, you have like a note section. I always put the most recent note at the top. I find that's the most effective way to do it. So you can see like right at a first glance what the last touch point was and what you might have talked about. So you don't have to scroll all the way down to the bottom because remember, you're probably gonna be talking to these people for years and years. The most recent thing will be at the top, thing that you got to remember the most. So when you're having that conversation with them, I want to make sure you're thinking about what the expectations is for the next call, like the time frame. If you're chatting with someone, they seem super cool. They're not like planning. They're like, yeah, we found a forever home. Thanks so much, Linus, for helping us find that. Be like, yeah, it sounds great. Like, I'll give you a call in 6 months. We can chat about things, make whatever it happens to be. Set up that expectation for the next call. If it's something that's a little bit more hot, right? They're like, oh yeah, like I was, thinking to start looking at listings and stuff. Like, okay, I'll give you a call next week, right? Whatever that time frame is, make sure you set up the expectations for that next call. Tag them with the temperature, hot, or hot, warm, cold, whatever system you want for tagging them. And then the other thing I want to make sure you think about, and there's different ways you can go about this, is either creating a task for the next time that you want to talk to them. So like you can put a task in the system saying, okay, like 6 months from now, call John Doe, or you can tag them with like a month or season, right? Like June 2025. So when you're making your calls, it's June 2025. You can just sort them by June 2025. You can see who you need to make calls to that month. I always kind of caution about creating the tasks for people because you might get into a situation where you feel like you're overtasked, right? And you fall behind in your task list. So it really depends what situation you want to do and whatever workflow works best for you. These are just a couple of suggestions. Like if you have a task created for each person at the end of a call, The one thing I like about that is that you know that the gravy train, and that's what the picture there's for, is never going to end with that person. You don't want to forget about someone. The worst thing you can do is call someone, yeah, sure, we'll talk in 6 months. Then you don't have anything to remind you that you need to call that person in 6 months because you said you're going to call them in 6 months. Right? That task is a good way to do it. But again, tasks come back up, especially if you get behind in doing your calls. So that can become a little bit overwhelming. So another way to do is tagging it with the month or the season so that you can just filter through your list and see who you need to call that month. And worst case scenario, you're like, oh geez, like I didn't get a chance to call my July people. You can go into Remarketer and pull up all your July 2024 people. You can push them to August 2024. You can push them all a month or something like that. So just something to think of, but you always want to make sure that all your contacts, you have the next call set up in some form or another so you don't let people fall off the gravy train. Don't let anyone leave the gravy train. Okay, final thing I want to talk about is executing the plan. Putting people on the plan, forming the plan, doing all that stuff's great, but 9 times out of 10, I feel like most realtors really will drop the ball because they just don't have the motivation. They get too busy or something happens and they just can't do the things that they said they want to do. They can't stick to the plan. Now, I put up Nike's symbol here, and I'm going to say just do it, right? I know it's easier said than done, but there's a few techniques that I think are very valuable if you're having problems, you know, setting that time, setting aside that time every day, every week to make your calls, to do all the note cards, to do whatever it is. Time blocking is so important. I was literally talking to an agent about this yesterday. Um, if you are putting your calendar, setting your schedule for the month, the week, whatever it is, put in first all the the non-negotiable things, like your daughter's dance recital, like you're coaching your son's hockey game or whatever. You put those things in there. Then the next things after that you want to work around it is your business development items, right? So your calls, maybe your door knocking, your cold calling, whatever it is that you're doing, you want to make sure you time block some time in the day to do those. Most realtors I know who are successful with this, they block off a couple hours in the morning, right, for either calls or working on whatever it is, like their business, because in the afternoon is when they spend, running around with clients doing showings. So just block off those times and try and make sure that you don't bump those in your calendar. You put in your calendar, stick to it, work around it. If someone calls you, a client, and wants to book a showing, do a listing appointment, whatever, do your best. And I know it's not always possible, but do your best to work around those time block times. Right? Everyone always wants to drop everything for clients. But trust me, if you say, okay, how about Thursday afternoon instead of saying Thursday morning, if that's the time they suggest, be like, well, it looks like I got a couple of appointments that morning. How's Thursday afternoon for you? Try and respect your time and make sure you respect this time blocking. Next important thing is you want to make sure you get into a routine, right? So these time blocking bits, make it a recurring event or in your calendar, a recurring task, right? A recurring blocked off time. So you get into the habit of, okay, I go to the office every day, 9 o'clock, 9 to 11. It's time where I work on these things, right? After that, that's when I go and I do all the things with my clients. But 9 to 11 is my prospecting, my sphere of influence marketing, my calls, whatever it is. Get into that routine. You'll find that once you start a routine, it becomes a lot easier. Again, I was talking to an agent about this yesterday. I recently started being really regimented about my diet and watching like what I ate, counting my calories, getting into a routine. And about a year ago, I was like, hey, I think I'm good. I stopped doing all those routine items, and I was like, I'm just going to kind of play it by ear. And I found that as soon as I started doing that, my routine and regimen slipped to the point where I got on the scale last week and I was the highest I've been all year, right? And I was like, shoot, okay, it's time to get back into that routine. And it's hard sometimes to kick your butt to get back into that routine, but it's very vitally important. Once you get in that routine, it's a lot easier. Once you fall out of it, it's harder to get back onto it. So try and set up that routine and stick to it. The other thing I would like to suggest to everybody is find an accountability partner. Right? If you're struggling with making your calls every day, find someone else who is too, and be that person for that other person. They can be it for you as well, to make sure that you are doing it every day, every week, whatever it is. Be like, hey, like John, let's both head into the office every day at 9. Like, let's come in together and make sure we each are doing it. I need someone to help me, and I'll help you. It sounds like a silly thing, but it helps out a lot if you know someone else is relying on you to be their accountability partner. They'll help keep you accountable as well. The final thing I want to talk about, and during the Successful Agent seminar series that Aaron did near the beginning of the year, um, he did a thing where he's tracking the progress of all the agents he was helping coach, for the period of like whatever the 3 months that he was doing that seminar series was. Tracking your progress, just setting up a spreadsheet, setting it weekly goals, and making sure every time you make a call, you just tick it off on the sheet. It's invaluable to see how far along you're doing. And if you're slipping behind, you got to pick up your socks and make some more calls. And if you're ahead, you can be like, hey, like maybe I can take the foot off the gas for the next couple of days, right? Like whatever it is, at least you can see where you're going. But like just filling out that spreadsheet and saying, yep, I've got my goal of like 20 calls this week. I'm on pace. I've done my 5. Every time you make a call, you can like put a little tick on the wall for it. It's very valuable. It's satisfying and it keeps you accountable. So trust me, tracking your progress, whatever form it is, spreadsheet, even just like a sheet on your wall, a whiteboard, you can just do a little notch for every call you make. Calls made this month, right? Whatever it is that works for you, it's an extremely valuable tool to use.